Hi, my name is Ann Tapia, and I am the coordinator for the Regional Autism Advisory Council of Southwest Ohio. We shorten that with a lovely acronym, as there are many in this field, by calling it RAAC. So I am sharing with you a bit about what this job entails as the coordinator for RAAC, and also inviting you to come join in the effort that that we have in the RAAC community. So as you hear some of the things that I'll talk about, please also hear throughout this my invitation to you to come to the table and be part of these efforts, whether it's discussions or training opportunities or just initiatives that we're working toward. So please let me know if there are ways that you feel like you could plug in with us, because I would absolutely love that. I also do want to say that I teach another of the courses in this certificate course. So I hope that I get to meet some of you who are continuing on in the certificate course as you get to the theories in developmental disabilities. So I look forward to meeting you. About RAAC, I want to share just kind of overview information. So the Regional Autism Advisory Council had gone through a process of rebranding and looking at our mission and our vision just prior to the pandemic beginning. So I feel like it left us really well positioned to be able to move forward throughout the pandemic, knowing exactly what our purpose and our intention is. And the why behind our group is that we believe that individuals, families, and professionals in the autism community deserve the highest quality of life. And so that's kind of our overarching North Star as we do the work that we do. The mission is that RAAC connects organizations, individuals, and family members to enhance the autism community by collaborating and sharing knowledge. And you'll hear some keywords in that that we kind of use as our value system. We champion the community building, and that we want to think about how to advocate in an environment that's inclusive and accepting across the spectrum and across the lifespan. So this really, as we think about community, we're really trying to think about everyone. We also think about collaboration, understanding that we make a bigger impact when we partner with one another. And as we try to tackle some large complex issues, that work is done much easier and more impactful when we do it together with our collective resources and strengths that we bring to the table. And then finally, knowledge sharing, that we serve as a resource hub and we really encourage creative solutions. I want to kind of put out there that this is, well, our vision is thinking about how the autistic community can best be supported. We're doing that through the lens of supporting professionals. So we want as many folks with lived experience to be part of these conversations and the collaborative efforts. But the ultimate goal and our vision is that the organizations who are supporting people are feeling like they have what they need to do the best work possible. But I will tell people, I don't care what your role is in terms of whether or not you join us in these conversations and task force meetings, because ultimately the lived experience has to be part of the conversation in order for us to really define and understand what it means to be best equipped, right? So we can't, without lived experience, those professionals those of us professionals in the community really cannot assume to know what's best. We need to hear it from the people that have the lived experience, from their direct mouths and from their experiences with systems and just everyday life, to help us understand what we need to do to be accessible, inclusive, and thinking about what quality indicators are most important and that we should be prioritizing. Oh, sorry, I have a video in here. So I want to share this video, which kind of talks a bit about the history of RAAC, and also gives a little bit of the background that I'm talking about. And then I'll dive in a bit more about how we do what I'm talking about. Bear with me as it pops up on the screen.
RAAC assists organizations in Southwest Ohio to be best equipped to do their work supporting individuals with autism.
The one thing I know is none of us are alone in these journeys that we take to provide these services. And if we can let our guard down and come to the table and be collaborative and look to see what the needs of our community are, not everything's possible.
I think one of the things that I want the community to know is that RAAC is a really great place to go to have your questions answered, to learn what's new, what's up and coming, what's happening in the world of autism, specifically here in Cincinnati.
Network with one another and share resources. I often tell people, I don't have to be the expert. I just have to know the experts. And my favorite answer to questions is, I don't know, but I know someone who does. Be Safe is a training opportunity where we bring together first responders and teach them about autism and other disabilities, and then bring together young adults and adults with autism and other disabilities, and they're paired together with the first responders so they have a chance for mutual understanding and learning. What does it say as an organization to be a member of RAAC?
They could say that they were on the cutting edge of really trying to coordinate resources for families and for schools and for practitioners in the communities.
As a young professional coming up in her career and focusing on individuals with autism spectrum disorders, RAAC was such an important learning opportunity for me, and I think for many other hospital-based employees who've had the opportunity to interface with RAAC, because it shows us very quickly that there is a whole world of resource and opportunity for the children and families that we see outside of our walls. And we know that it's there. We know that it's there, but to meet the folks, to meet the people in those agencies, in those settings, to work with them, to be at the same table was incredibly informative for me, and I think for a number of my colleagues. And I'm really grateful to the partners that I was able to join with and network.
Are there accomplishments that really stand out to you as highlights during your time as coordinator?
It's now a 20-year organization. And it just started with an idea with a few people at the table, and to have really, we see lots of these initiatives come and go. First, autism has sustained and grown itself over time, but so has the organization. And I think that all of those sustainability issues that we talk about, just certainly as my time as coordinator, we just solidified and to move on. And we built on what the county relationships began to be in collaboration, and collaborations are not easy. I think that then we added a lot of the private resources because public-private partnerships have become really such an important core to the services of RAAC, and having everyone at that table has become really, really, I think, critical in the success that RAAC has had.
All right. There was music at the end of that. That was very hard to hear, but I wanted to play it through so you had a chance to see the photo credit that was on there. We had, we had partnered with Renee Mauser, who is an autistic adult and also has a photography company. And so she was the one who had taken many of those pictures that were provided, as well as pull it all together for our short little snippet of a video. So Wanted to make sure that Renee had credit there. So you heard from a number of individuals. Many of them had been part of the initial beginning stages of RAAC forming and coming together 20 years ago. And as Kay had mentioned in that video, it started off with a small group of families who went to Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services and said, you know, we have children with autism and we're being told a number of different approaches and recommendations that we should be taking, from the hospital, Cincinnati Children's, to the school system, to the county board, who all had different entry points and perspectives of what would best suit the child's needs. And so the families were just feeling really overwhelmed with information and conflicting information. And the fact that people weren't communicating, you know, these large systems and entities were not thinking holistically about the person that they were serving. So what formed was this Regional Autism Advisory Council, RAAC, and they hired a coordinator. There have been a handful of them. I'm the 6th person who has served in the coordinator role. And the idea is that as coordinator, my job is to really reach out across our 4 counties in Southwest Ohio, Butler, Claremont, Hamilton, and Warren, and try to bring us all together to think about some of the needs that the autistic community has. So we share resources with one another, we network with one another, and then we identify gaps that exist in the community, and we try to think about what we can do to address those gaps from a collective vision, recognizing, you know, as we said, as I said earlier, that we really can do better and address some really hard topics when we bring our pooled resources together as one. So to do that, these are a list of the task forces that I facilitate across our Southwest Ohio area. We have one in each of the 4 counties that are part of my region. And it's fascinating that each county really has a different perspective around where they are, what their needs are, and what kind of that local spin and how supports are provided. So it is really interesting, and I have bullets under each of them that indicate where our primary focus area is at this point. So we have in Butler County some work being done around building partnerships for student success. And this originally started a couple of years ago with training opportunities for families so that they can understand the IEP system and think strategically about how to build partnerships that are focused on relationship with the school, understanding that it's a journey. You know, if a student, especially if a student is identified early on in their education system as having a disability, or in particular autism, that they have this, you know, 12-year, 13-year process of working with the district to meet the students' needs. And that's not always easy. It can be bumpy along the way, and lots of conflict can come up for a variety of different reasons. And so this training breaks down some of the language barrier that can occur by nature of systems talk, right? That, you know, as they're at the table and all these acronyms are being thrown out, and just the types of language that gets used in the school system can sound a bit intimidating as a family member who's at the table, who's just thinking, I want my child to have the best education possible. I want to see the most progress out of their educational environment as possible. So this training really gave the ABCs of IEPs. You know, it broke it down to what is an individualized education program and who is involved in that kind of thing. And we had a lot of success with it. We had a lot of families who were engaging with us. But over time, what we found so often is we would hold one of these events, and within a few days to a few weeks, we would be getting phone calls and emails saying, you know what I really need is some basic information about IEPs. And we'd be like, you just missed it. You know, he's, oh, where were you 2 days ago? So we are in process right now. COVID kind of helped push this effort to make them more accessible by providing like 5 to 6 minute video snippets around topics that really offer the same information and break it down in a way that's, you know, bite-sized so that families can access that. on their own time. If it's 10 o'clock at night is the first that they're going to be able to access this information, it's still accessible to them. And our hope is that we have a pool of them that we have started, have not yet released, so it's coming soon. But the hope is that it kind of gives enough basic information, and then when it's safe to do so, we'll host these events again that kind of build on that basic ground level understanding. So that's one example in Butler County of something that we're working on. In Claremont County, we have been focused on supporting educational assistants and ensuring that their educational aides, educational assistants in their Claremont school systems really have the best supports to do their job, which unfortunately, a lot of times aides are thrown into circumstances and have very little training and background information. And so we really want to be able to give them tools and resources to be able to feel like they have some strategies and tools in their back pocket as they're supporting students. It's the type of position that is underpaid and yet a really intensive level of support for students in the school environment. And so we value the role so much, and we value that education is critical and can also lead to less burnout, if people are feeling supported in this way. So that's an important initiative that we're working toward. And our thought is some of these same videos that we're developing for families in Butler County could be helpful to our educational assistants, and just breaking down some of the acronyms that they're having to learn on the fly in the school system a lot of times. So in Hamilton County, we are focused, I swear not all of these are school focused, but these ones happen to be. In Hamilton County, we are focused on an educator forum for autism. So this is a group I actually had sat in prior to my being the coordinator role, because my previous role was more in a mental health system, but we supported a lot of students who were identified with autism just by nature of the level of support needs that they had. This was a natural fit for me to be part of because a lot of the people we supported were autistic. So at any rate, when I first was at the Hamilton County RAAC task force, I was there because I wanted to network with the educators. And over time, what we found is our public school representation kind of faded away, and our private school representation is far more prevalent today. And we miss that. There's a gap in who's at the table and how that conversation goes, just by nature of that. So what we are doing is holding these educator forum for autism events on 3 times a year, so quarterly within an academic year, where we bring together private and public school folks to talk about resource and network with one another, but under that kind of really strategic educational perspective. So we welcome all different roles. We want, the educational assistants to the administrators, to the intervention specialists, to the gen ed teachers. We really want anyone who is supporting students with autism to be present in those conversations, recognizing that it's important to have that diversity of the conversation, and also that it's all age ranges. So any type of education role, as well as all ages and stages of learning, are welcome into these conversations. And then most of these we will have like breakout discussions that are topic specific, so that people can identify where their needs would most be met, and spend their time in conversation that's really meaningful for them and what their role is. So Warren County, on the other hand, is focused on co-occurring autism and mental health, which is a need across all areas. I mean, this is not unique to Warren County, but just happens to be the focus for Warren County's RAAC task force. So in this area, one of the big things that we've identified is that there's often silos of support. While there are mental health supports and there are agencies who are serving autistic people of all ages, oftentimes, and they're part of our RAAC task force in Warren County, but oftentimes what they'll tell us is they just feel ill-equipped for particular needs that autistic people have. And so they look to the DD system for some additional supports and resources. And a lot of times the DD system is saying, you know, we just don't know mental health, and have this sense that they are not equipped to support people who have some more complex challenges by nature of some mental health needs. And so it ends up really being this kind of systemic finger pointing that neither side is feeling like they have the resources or supports, when really what needs to be happening is that collaborative approach of recognizing that both have resources and wisdom and experiences that can benefit from one another. And so we're really trying to think about how to strategically fill those gaps. And right now, our focus area is really identifying that there's just not enough people to support there's not enough professionals who are available to support the number of people who have the co-occurring autism and mental health needs. So trying to think through some funding aspects and some intentional marketing to be able to draw more people into this area to support the need. So those are kind of the big picture. In those county task force meetings, we really do have representation across the lifespan. So we have some folks who are focused on early intervention and others on adults, and others somewhere in between. So we often try to keep those agendas covering all different types of topics. And we also include in those agendas some time for policy and advocacy. And so part of my role is to really stay attuned to what's happening at at all levels. So locally, at the state level, as well as at the federal level, to understand how policy that's being rolled out is going to impact us on a local community level. And sometimes that leads to some advocacy efforts if there's policy that's going to make life more difficult for either the autistic person and their family, or if it's going to be really difficult for providers to support people in the ways that they know they need to support people. So we have some intentional conversation around that policy aspect in those discussions as well. So in our regional task forces, there are several different topics, and these tend to be across our Southwest Ohio, but we often will have some folks from other counties. So for example, some Montgomery County participation, Preble County. We've had a few folks from Clinton County who they don't have this kind of collaborative network. And while the resources may be slightly different just by nature of, geographically what's available, they find the benefit in being part of these discussions. So early intervention is typically 0 to 3. However, some of our early intervention providers work up to 6 and really into that transition into kindergarten. So the focus is 0 to 3, but sometimes a little bit older, especially as we talk about transition. Transition age is thinking about those who are 14 through 24, give or take. Transition really kind of depends on the system that you're talking about. And I'm sure that you either will or have talked about transition age at some point. The school system will consider a person eligible for services up until they're 22, but there's a big push to graduate in 4 years of high school education. So really transition could be anywhere between 18 and 22 from a school system perspective. Whereas if you're looking from a health insurance perspective, that might go all the way up to 26. And from a developmental disability perspective, that transition age really just depends on the person and what other systems they're involved in. So there can be such a range in the cap of that. So we really kind of think 14 through about 24, 25 age range. Beyond that, adult services and that task force, we're really thinking about people who have graduated. So 18-ish on up. And in particular, this group is trying to think about, what happens after a person graduates. The service systems just look drastically different than the way that the children's services are set up. And a lot of times families are not as aware and prepared for that change in how service systems are operating. And sometimes people will describe that as falling off a cliff, because it is, from a school perspective, you have all kinds of people coming to the table for an IEP meeting. And then you go to a DD, a developmental disability county board meeting, and you don't even have half the amount of people around the table anymore once the person has graduated. So we're really trying to think about how we can best support those adults to have some additional resources, education supports that might be helpful in their continued life path and journey. Next we have, I did not change the name on here, but we officially named it Ebb and Flow, which stands for Empowered Black and Brown Families with Disabilities, Looking Within and Outward and Within. Sorry, I said that backwards. Outward and within. And this concept is really addressing the equity, inclusion, and intersectionality issues that Black and Brown families with disabilities face. And so we have a group that meets on a regular basis twice a month to identify this as both a kind of internal growth opportunity as well as a systemic and process like change initiative that we're trying to push forward from our various vantage points and influence our systems so that they may be more, one, aware, but also two, accepting and accountable for providing more equity in how services are, how they're received, as well as how they're invited, how families are invited to the table, which a lot of times can be the sticking point in just that the invitation for Black and Brown families is not as intentional as it may be for Caucasian families. It just, culturally there are differences. And so the way information can be shared may not necessarily be accessible. And so we try to break down those barriers and think about what we can be doing to better support families so they have the supports that they need. And then finally, our safety initiative. So this one is, again, all ages on that one. And our hope is to try to be thinking about proactive steps that can be taken to support folks who are unfortunately a vulnerable population. Statistically, there are about 70% of people with disabilities will experience abuse or neglect in their life. And the services and supports that exist around safety often are reactive. So, if somebody has experienced abuse or neglect, then we can provide some supports and, work through trauma and address where needs maybe now exist that didn't previously. And our safety initiative is trying to consider what proactive steps can we be putting in place that help prevent that high number in our disability community. So that in the video you saw a little snippet about Be Safe. That is one effort in terms of training first responders and giving them more resources and understanding of both the autistic community, but the greater disability community as well. And we also teach the community. So what we learned pretty early on in that work is that we have some stigmas and myths about what the role of first responders are, and that gets perpetuated into the community, and that impacts the engagement that first responders have. So we also offer training to people with disabilities, sometimes young adults or adults, who then get partnered up with a first responder, and that really deepens the learning on both sides, that there is some mutual respect that is developed and fostered in that training opportunity, as well as just fun. We have so much fun doing those events because they're highly interactive, and we get to also have an impact on both sides of that equation, so that hopefully there are fewer emergency situations, but when they occur, both sides of people have a better understanding of what to expect and what the role is of the other person, and really just gain a bit more depth and knowledge of who each other are. So it's a lot of fun. It does remind me that video, all of it was done pre-COVID. So just recognize that, we were not doing the safety precautions. The Be Safe event is one that we have not been able to do because we just feel like it can't be replicated in the same way in a virtual environment. And so we are really looking forward to the day where we can be in person and host those events again. The other piece that I want to say across all of these task forces is that we really, I tell people we speak from an autistic lens. However, so much of what we're doing applies to the greater disability community. And so I really mean it that all are welcome. We are, there is an intentional focus on autism by nature of the prevalence numbers. However, we learn from our friends with other disabilities, and there's opportunity to learn from what the group is focused on too. So, all of these are open to anyone in the disability community. The other big piece of it, especially as we think about how we tackle those large complex issues, is training. And when RAAC first started 20 years ago, that was kind of the core concept of what came out of those initial meetings and discussion, was that there were a lot of gaps. There are, shouldn't even say were, it's present tense. There are a lot of gaps that exist in knowledge, and there continues to be an ever evolving understanding of how we can best support people. So our training institute sometimes includes myself and a team of volunteers who will go to organizations and meet really specific needs that they may have, depending on if it's a school system or women, infants, and children, the WIC department, or fire department. There's just such a range of different audiences that we can support and provide some knowledge and help them to do their job from their roles in a different way in supporting autistic people. Or we might also offer training opportunities in which it's more like conference-based, and we're bringing in sometimes local experts, but also national and international experts to kind of enhance our community in terms of some specialized best practice work that's being done. So I have a link on here. I have several links on here. The first one is all training opportunities that are offered through RAAC, and it includes what's currently available, as well as some of our recorded sessions that have been made possible as well. The second link is flyers that folks send me. So one of the invitations that I have for you all is to join a distribution, training, and event list that I have, in which, by nature of being so well connected in our community, there are so many events and trainings that hit my radar, and I do my best to be a resource hub, and as I gather that in, I share it back out. So this RAAC Flyers link will take you to what's currently available in our community and what's coming up, and beyond what RAAC is necessarily involved in. And you are also welcome to email me or go to the RAAC website and tell me you want to be added to that training event distribution list, and you'll receive emails on a regular basis about what events and trainings are happening in our community. I always tell people when they sign up, you're welcome and I'm sorry, because it is a lot of information. I try to limit during our busy seasons to just one email a day, but there does tend to be a lot that I receive and then that I share back out. So that RAAC Flyers link is a good one to just kind of get a sense of what's coming and what's available. And the other one that I always like to plug is from our partner, one of our member organizations, OCALI, which is the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incident. And they developed ASD strategies in action, autism spectrum disorder strategies in action. These were originally developed for families to be able to get some really good kind of, I don't even want to call it basic level, because they go into some good depth, but just kind of overview level of autism. And it's, the first one is kind of just like a general discussion. It's I want to say an hour and a half. And after you complete that one, then 10 more open up for you on specific topics, from behavior to sensory to occupational therapy need. Well, it's still sensory. I'm trying to think what else they have in there. Specific strategies like scaffolding or various aspects of supporting a person with autism. And they've developed these in a way that you can take a track for early intervention, for school age, for transition age, or behavior. I mean, they've just really done an excellent job of offering resources that are, at your own pace and at your need, depending on what you're looking for. They're free for Ohio residents. So it's just a really great resource that we have at our fingertips, and they're really well done. It's the kind of thing that they're very interactive. If you take the final assessment, you don't have to, but there is a final assessment at the end of it, which allows you to have access to credit at the end as well. So, and a bunch of different disciplines are included in there. So it's a great resource that we have free in our community and in the state of Ohio. I don't recall what they're charging at this point for out-of-state residents. I don't know if anybody's coming from out of state, but it's still worthy. I think they're a great resource in our community. So as I said at the beginning, invitation to connect. I would love to have you all involved in any of these aspects that I've shared with you today. There's strength in numbers. We definitely need you at the table, especially as emerging professionals. I know some of you are probably in a role already in the community, and we value having you at the table. So I would invite you to join us. The website is listed first on there, which is just RAACSWO.org. And then we have Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So you're welcome to follow there as well. You're also welcome to just email me. So feel free to reach out. My email address is included on there, ann.tapia@cchnc.org. So either way that is most comfortable, I would love to have you join us. I also want to just invite, if there are any questions that you have sparked in the midst of my blabbering at you for this long, please reach out to me. I'm happy to set up a time to chat, either virtually or meet in person for some socially distanced, safe conversation, or to have a phone call. So I'm super flexible. If you would like to learn more or think about how something you're doing might have some carryover and collaboration with the work that RAAC is doing. So I can't wait to hear from you. And thank you for taking the time to listen today. And I look forward to meeting some of you who may be journeying on in the next course.